Hi, students. We are going to close read together this piece of text called Blood, Smoke, and Freedom. It's the true story of the American Revolution. So my recommendation is that you listen to it first with me, and then you read it by yourself a second time. Okay, so this is a story about Joseph Plum Martin. He was a soldier during the Revolutionary War. And look at the caption here, says, "A scary sight. Joseph watches as his fellow fighters take on a group of British soldiers known as Redcoats because of their bright red uniforms." Joseph Plum Martin was still a boy when he became an American soldier. Would he survive his first battle? By Lauren Tarshi and art by Gary Hanna. And Lauren Tarshi, she writes a lot of the stories for I Survive. So I think this is, if you really like this book or this little piece of story, this little excerpt, you can read some of her I Survive stories. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions shook the ground. Smoke filled the air. 15-year-old Joseph Plum Martin was lying in the dirt, trying to stay alive. It was August 27th, 1776. America and England were fighting the first big battle of the Revolutionary War in New York. Joseph had begged his family to let him join the American army. He thought being a soldier would be exciting, and he was sure America would win. But now Joseph knew Americans were doomed. Doomed. Hundreds of soldiers were dead. The cries of injured men rose up into the sky. It seemed Joseph had two choices. Surrender. Oh, look, it tells me down here. Give up or stop fighting because you know you won't win. Or die. It seemed Joseph had two choices. Surrender or die. How was being a soldier different from what Joseph expected? Stop and ask yourself. A new world. Joseph was born in 1760. The United States wasn't a country yet. America was still mostly wilderness. Wilderness, a wild natural area where few people live. America was still mostly wilderness, except for a strip of land along the East Coast. Well, look, here it is. This land was ruled by England. It was divided into 13 areas or colonies. We've been learning about colonies. Joseph lived in the colony of Connecticut. Connecticut, oh, right here. Connecticut. Hundreds of thousands of people had come to the colonies from England and other parts of Europe. Rules were too strict there. People had few choices about their religion, their jobs, or even their friends. Oof. In the colonies, people had more choices, but they still had to follow England's rules. Not everyone in the colonies had a good life. Hundreds of thousands of Native American people were killed. They died of diseases brought by Europeans. They died in fights over land. They starved after being kicked out of their homelands. During this time, African people were dragged to America in chains. They were forced to become slaves. Meanwhile, Americans had become angry at England. They said it wasn't fair that they had to follow England's rules. America's anger towards England smoldered like a fire. And then, in April 1775, that anger exploded into war. The American Revolution had begun. Okay, check for yourself. If you know this answer, you can keep reading. Why did people leave England and other countries to come to the colonies? If you aren't sure, rewind and go back. Okay. Getting ready to fight. At first, the thought of fighting scared Joseph, but his courage grew. Soon he wanted to join the new American army. In June 1776, his family said yes. Joseph sailed to New York City. This big, bustling city had been turned into an American army camp. I was now what I had long wished to be, he later wrote, a soldier. But Joseph wasn't really a soldier yet, and neither were most of the nearly 200,000 men and teenagers in the American army. They were just regular people like Joseph. Some could barely fire a gun. Their leader, General George Washington, Georgie, my favorite, had never led an army before. All summer, he struggled to turn this group into strong fighters. Joseph didn't complain about shooting practice or endless marching. He choked down army meals such as wormy biscuits and flavorless meat. He coped with the summer heat and the stink of garbage and human waste. Ugh. Still, he was excited to be a soldier. Pause and check. What did Joseph and others need to learn to become a soldier? If you aren't sure, go back and rewind. Okay, let's move on. Surprise attack! Meanwhile, the British planned a huge attack on New York. They sailed ships packed with weapons. Joseph could see the soldiers on those ships. They were waiting like caged beasts. They were hungry for blood and ready to strike. They struck early one morning at the end of August. While it was still dark, more than 15,000 British soldiers arrived on the shores of Brooklyn. Brooklyn was a village across the river from New York City. There were a few thousand American soldiers there. They were all caught by surprise. Washington rushed to send more men to Brooklyn. Joseph was one of them. He saw a scene of horror. Men were lying in the grass, some broken arms, some with broken legs, some with broken heads, Joseph wrote. He and other soldiers tried to stop the British from reaching American forts, buildings for troops that strengthened to protect against the attack. But the British forces were too powerful. Hundreds of American soldiers were killed or injured. Stop and think. What did Washington do when the British attacked Brooklyn? If you don't know, go back and rewind and watch it again. Secret escape. Even with all the blood and fear, General George Washington stayed calm. Then he came up with a brilliant plan. He would sneak the American army out of Brooklyn during the night. He sent an urgent message. Very important. We need boats in Brooklyn now. Because it was dark and foggy, thousands of soldiers were able to sneak back into New York City. This included Joseph. In the morning, the British attacked the forts. They were shocked to find them empty. The Americans still lost the Battle of Brooklyn, but their army had survived, and they would keep fighting. The American Revolution lasted for 8 years. Towns were burned down. Thousands of soldiers were killed. Many Americans felt afraid all the time. But in 1738, the war finally ended. The British surrendered. America had won the war. Joseph fought during the entire war. He later moved to Maine, married, and raised 5 children. He died at age 89. He always remembered the terrors of war, but he was also proud that he helped America win its fight for freedom.